Cozy Gloves here, and today we're going to be taking a look at S-Layer. We're going to be doing a rundown. So we're going to be covering pretty much all the features and functionalities of S-Layer and giving you fast examples, but this is for the catered towards the person who already knows a good chunk of what stuff does and just wants a fast rundown, just skimming over stuff that's less important, focusing on the stuff that sort of makes more sense with the synth. If you're going through this as a series, this may be a little bit overwhelming for you. Don't worry, we're going to be covering a lot of these things in detail later on. Some of these things I might just tell you what they do and move on. Other things I'll give you more examples. So this is S-Layer. I'm assuming you can open it and do all that good stuff. So here we have 8 layers. This first window here at the top will simply show you your layers as you play them. So if we hit it, we see that these samples are being triggered, and we could see a visual representation of the samples. We're able to solo a sample, and you can see that's the top sample that we've soloed, and we can see it visually moving here. This is really handy because you may occasionally have a layer that is not active, and you may have forgotten that you froze a setting somewhere. So this is just a hint, like, hey, you don't have this active. Do you not want that active? Just so that you remember. So maybe you're flipping through scenes and you see that, you're like, oh, well, that's what that's there's for. And also it just looks cool. So there you have that. We're able to load our own samples into here using sample maps. I'm going to have a separate video on that, and sample maps are sort of something that just deals with reactor ensembles in general. So you can either go to the video on that in this series, or you already know what that is. So we're not going to worry about that too much. But if you do want to load your own samples, you can click the little waveform icon, load them up. And if you're in edit mode, you're able to right click on this icon and insert a sample map or open sample map editor, which is what that button does. So there are your options. We have our BPM, glide, velocity, randomization, trigger, tune, decay, auto, volume control, volume. So let's go ahead and cover just a couple of these real quick. So here we've got our volume control. It's just volume control. Auto will take into account the different layers and turn down the synth accordingly. So it's kind of cool. And then this little icon right here is just a limiter. So cool. We have our master decay envelope. We have the ability to globally tune it. If you want to hear the sound that you have currently loaded up, simply hit the trigger button, and that's the sample. Now, this random button, it will randomize all parameters that have an orange dot. Holy cow, an orange dot next to it. So let's say, oh, we're randomizing our sample. And let's say we want to randomize these guys here too. Well, if we hit random, you can see them changing. Let's say we're happy with those. So we'll simply unrandomize them. And now we have effectively only randomizing what we want. So we're able to control what we want to randomize in a way that is creatively useful. Now, if you're playing live, you may want it to randomize every time you hit a new note. Maybe that's something that you want to do. It's sort of like on the edge, like, ooh, what's it going to sound like next? Also good for subtle changes in timbre. Well, you can do that by hitting this button. It'll light up blue. And now whenever I hit a note, it'll randomize whatever has the randomization parameter next to it. Simply hitting a note will just random. It'll just hit the random button. So pretty cool. And we'll talk about ways of controlling the randomization as soon as we go over these guys. Next up, we have velocity and glide. Glide makes more sense when you have the transposition control on. So we're able to trigger all the parameters that we have set up into 8 individual scenes. And so you're able to control these scenes by activating a keyboard to flip through them. And it starts at C3. In this case, it's actually C5 because there's 2 negative octaves to MIDI, and they just didn't account for that. And just to show you what I mean, if we go into the piano roll and we hit C5, you see it's switching, but if I hit anything below this, no dice. And if I start on C3 like it says it is, it's still no dice. So that was an interesting sound. And what we have there, so just so you know, that's what's going on there. You're able to copy and paste scenes by simply hitting copy, select a new scene, and then hit paste if you want. I'm not going to do that. And what we were able to do is instead of flipping through them like that, we could say, oh, transpose. Hit that. It'll actually deactivate this little keyboard icon. And that simply means that you are now playing this as if it were notes. So it'll pitch up and down according to the note that you're hitting. So you may consider using that instead. Another note about using this is if you're going to use it as a drum machine, it's monophonic. So if I were to hit my F sharp and my C key, so that's going to trigger scene 7 and scene 1. If I hit them at the same time, it has to pick one. So in this case, it picked 7. This case, it picked 1. So you'd want to render out your samples. That way you can use them in an actual drum, some sort of a drum playback plugin, a drum machine plugin. Okay, cool. So that's this guy. You might be wondering what the lightning bolt is for. You don't really generally want this on, but what it does is you may experience clicking while you're working, and you may find that undesirable. Maybe your CPU load's being hit pretty hard. You can turn this guy on. We'll introduce some latency. It's not a feature I really use, but there's a big paragraph explaining it. From what I understand, it just introduces latency if you're having problems with clicks and pops. So you can go ahead and turn that guy on for some added boost as far as, well, added processing power in a delayed sort of way. So, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and talk about these. So you have 4 parameter pages. And of these parameter pages, you're able to go through effects, envelope, external, and on each of them, you have these bars, these sliders. I'll refer to them as index markers just because it seems like a convenient name. And we're able to adjust these by clicking and dragging. You see the value being represented right there. Each one of these controls a parameter of a sample. So each one of these layers represents a sample. So we have 8 layers, so there's 8 samples. And as I move them, in this case, changing this one will change the sample it selects from the sample map. Changing this one will change the offset. So normally in a sample, if we were to open one up and hit Control E, here we've got a sample. Normally, you know, it's going to start at the beginning and play through. But if you offset it, it might start here instead. So you push the starting point of the sample up, so it'll start partway through the sample. So that's what that does, which is really nifty. So you're able to do this for all of them. So if you have random silent samples and you can't figure out what's wrong, maybe the offset or the start has been pushed back to where there's no noise in that sample anyways. For example, if we solo one, here it is at the beginning. As we move, you can hear it. And now it's, well, 100. But at the end, you see there's like nothing. So I'd be like, oh, what's wrong? Well, it's the start offset thing going on there. We also have the ability to do delays, so we can delay the sample from when we hit it. So if I hit, let me solo it one more time. As you see this starts up right away, but that takes a while to get going. So you can delay things. You can make them musically relevant by hitting this little music key. And I believe this quantizes it to 16th notes. So you're able to make them relevant to whatever tempo you're working at, which can be very handy. And you could create some pretty cool stuff using a whole bunch of different samples. Maybe you have some sort of crazy idea in your mind. So very cool. The next option we have here is pitch. And we're able to quantize these in semitones, so they're more musically relevant. We can pitch our sample up or down. I believe 2 octaves. Yep, 24. And we're also able to pan it left or right. And we're also able to change the volume. Of the volume, you can actually add 6 decibels if you desire. We have these controls here on the side. Well, let's move down first. So we have these little randomization buttons underneath. We're able to randomize each cell individually. But you'll notice the top one is not changing. Let me get out of solo mode. You see how it's dark blue? It's not changing. It's been frozen. So to unfreeze it, I simply double click. And now it's unfrozen, and it will also move. If I double click it again, it will freeze it. So let's say I like those. I could go ahead and randomize the rest. Handy dandy. Another thing you may want to do is you may want it to be randomized, but you don't want it this randomized. You only want it randomized within a certain selection. You can do that by setting a minimum and maximum value for the sliders. So they can only select values between the minimum and maximum that you've set. So what you can do is you just drag these guys and you see them represented up here. So what I have effectively done is said only select samples on the sample map from 54 to 89. And now if I randomize with our lowest value, and if we click here, you see our top value is 89 and our bottom value is 54. And so that is what we have done there. Very handy. So that's what these guys do for each of these. So maybe you want some subtle pitch randomization, but you like your samples the way they are, but you want to randomize your pitch every time. Well, you could select your pitch, turn on the randomization whenever you hit a note, and you could do that. And it could be maybe a cool thing that you want to do. So, okay, cool. So we've got these things done. Let's go ahead and jump over to the side panels. So you see I'm able to click over here in these side panels right here. And if I click again on it, it will disappear. These control the individual sample behavior according to the parameter it says it's controlling. So these are sort of on-off type things, except for speed. Speed is a special situation. So we have mute. So we're able to mute particular samples. Let's say I want to mute these. And so let's turn this off too. And so let's unmute them. And that's what it was before. So, hey, that's kind of nifty. We have the ability to solo things. While solo mode is on, you can only solo one thing. So you can't like add things to your solo. So if you want to hear like 2 samples at the same time, but without the others, you'd have to use mute. And you also have mono. Mono will take a stereo sample. So let's find one of those. There you go. That's definitely, here we go. That'll be easy to hear. So that one's stereo, and we can hit mono, and let's make it mono. And now it is mono. So if you wanted to do that, they give you the ability to do that. A note about the mono control: if you have soloed something, the way you get out of solo mode is you must hit mute. So now if I go to mono, I hear all the sounds. But if I go to solo mode and then go to mono, I only hear the top sound. And you see it's light blue, indicating that this layer has been soloed. So I would have to exit solo mode by hitting mute, and you see the light blue disappears. So they give you some hints that you're in solo mode. If we come over to the other side, we have this REV, which stands for reverse. So let's go ahead and solo this bottom layer here, and we can actually reverse it. So pretty cool. And you can do that for any of the samples. You can change the speed of playback. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we also have phase. So we're able to flip the polarity, which can be a big game changer if you have weird phase issues, because you got all these layers and they sum up a certain way. So if you flip the phase of one, it'll change the way they sum, and you can get a very different sound. In this case, it probably won't be that great because it's just one sound. But it just did a polarity flip for me. And it's called phase, but technically it's polarity flip because phase is related to time. So let's go ahead and jump over to speed. So we have speed, and we have this times 1. So everything's being played back, and we have, if you click, it'll go to times 2, and then we have half of 2, or halftime. And this is only relevant, though, when the BPM mode is on. So beats per minute mode what it does is it makes this relevant to the tempo that we're playing it back. And it can be really cool. So if I hit it right now and then do it again, if we go over, and so that's what BPM mode is going to do for us. So we're able to play loops at different pitches and do some really cool stuff with those, even make tonal instruments, which is a really interesting idea. But if we go over to the effects tab, we have a granular engine. And if we turn this guy on, and we'll change our stretching options. Now our bottom one is the one that's being soloed, so that didn't have any effect. But if we turn this on, it will change our stretching option for us to a granular setting. So very interesting things. Just so you know, when it's off, meaning the granular mode is off, and we did that by simply going over grain on, turn it on for the first sample layer or whatever, that would change it back to the pitch stretching. And you see these are locked. You can actually unlock them if you want just by clicking. And if you try to move one, it will actually blink up here. So say, hey, we're BPM mode. Great. So we hit that and we're good to go. I glossed over these guys, and so I'm coming back to them right now. So we talked about how we have this transpose option, and we're able to play notes over keys. Well, glide will simply glide between the notes. So if you put up a glide, so you see how it glides with it off. And there we go. I was about it. It still glided. And then also these are global settings too. So this will go across scenes, and we'll talk about that right after this. This next one is also global. It's velocity. It'll make the instrument velocity sensitive. So if I hit it soft, and if I hit it hard, it'll be louder. Or I can make it so it's the same volume regardless of what I do, or I could take in partial accounts of that. If I come down here and turn the transpose mode off and turn the glide setting on, it will glide, but I have to hold down the scene. So if I hold down one scene and then hit another note, it'll glide. Let's turn this up to be a little bit more, and let's go. Let's see here. Let's go to another scene. There you go. It's a lot easier heard on that one. So very interesting. So you have to hold down the one note while you hit the other in the scenes. I generally don't do it because it's just a little confusing. So I'll go ahead and just use the transpose mode if I intend to use that functionality. So, okay, cool. So we've gotten over these so far, and we're cool with the top bar. Let's move on down to the sequencers and wrappers. So wrappers are pretty easy to understand. So you switch between the menus by clicking, and you see here that we have, let's take a note, we've got parameter pages. We have 4 of them, and each one of them has these sort of index, marker, slider controls that we're able to look through. And if we go through on our modulation, we see that these have 4 panels, and they link up to anything that's got these index controls. And what they do, and it's very simple, is you simply move through them, and you're able to scroll through them. And they're called wrappers because if you move, you see how they scroll up, but once they reach the maximum value, they move back to the 0. So they wrap around. You go back to the first index, and then they scroll up again and again. So very, very cool way of just changing samples, maybe in a more controlled method if you want to like automate it or something. Very cool. And we're able to do that 4 times. And you're able to just hook it up to whatever you want. So we go start delay and mess with that one. What the heck? And yeah, so that's the wrappers. If we come into sequencers, we see that we have 4 sequencers. We have A, B, C, D. Each one is an individual one. We're able to copy a sequencer, paste a sequencer, and also flip it. And we're able to randomize it. We're able to select waveforms. This is sort of a sample and hold randomization. And then we have square, triangle, wave, all these things. Bend will basically just scroll your waveform for you. So if you scroll it up, it'll do like so. It's easy to see on the triangle. So scroll. Whoa. So that's what bend does. You need it at a value of 50. Whoops. I didn't mean to turn the browser on. You need it at a value of 50 to have it be basically in its default position. You can double click it to reset it, but for whatever reason, it opened up my browser. So that was weird. Okay, so let's go moving on here a little bit. We have the ability to do smooth. So there's 2 ways to look at this thing, right? We can go, oh, no value, suddenly this value, move over, suddenly this value, move over, suddenly this value, right? We have these abilities to jump up, or we can interpolate. So instead of looking at this as a series of steps, we can look at this as, whoa, we're going up, going up, going up, going down, going down, going down, like a waveform. So what we can do is turn that on. So smooth will look at it like a waveform. So if we did this sine wave, it'll look at it and it'll say, oh, it's like a sine wave. But if we turn it off, it'll look at it like a value. And you're able to hook these up to anything that's got these controls underneath it. And you see, as soon as we do so, let's do this on pitch or pan, because pan's in the middle right now. So you see we get these bars. It's simply reading where we're currently at in our progression. The next step is we're going to play it, but you see, as we hit it, it does a little bit of movement. They appear there for a second, but then they go away. That's because we need to set a range. So if I click and drag, you see this little light gray rectangle shows up. That's the range this thing can go through. And right now it's looping, but you actually see these internal gray bars moving, indicating that it's altering the parameter that's in there. We're able, right now it's on smooth, so it's moving up smoothly. It's interpolating between the points. If we turn it off, you see they sort of snap. And if we do a minimum and maximum, this is extra apparent. So they just jump. But if we turn on smoothing, they're a little smoother. This is still a pretty drastic change though. So pretty handy. I'm going to go ahead and reset that. So don't forget to set your range. And what we have is we're also able to control the speed of playback. So we're able to, just come in here, change that. We can make it so it doesn't loop or that it does loop. And we can straight up turn it on or off completely. If we put values together, I believe they add. I haven't experimented with that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens. You may be wondering what spread is. Well, if you turn on spread, you see that each one will receive a different parameter. So it's spread out the parameters. So even though it's getting the modulation, each one will get a different modulation value, creating a variation. So that's what spread does. And what slide does, as you just saw, is if I move my spread, it does this nice little glide motion, because if we receive like a max value and then like a value here, it's going to snap to that new value, and that may create an unwanted modulation. So if you use slide, it will glide to that next value. It'll interpolate between it, just like smooth does. And that'll make it so that it's not so sudden or jerking. Maybe you want sudden or jerking. I don't know. But anyways, that's what slide and spread does. And you see we can control that for anything that's got the ABCD controls. So we're able to hook them up to internal sequencers. So that's what's going on there. We have some, down here we have some insert effects. You can go to, these are just, this is a reverb. It has a shelving EQ, a size, and a mix. We have a delay. And they each have their own set of snapshots if you want to come in here and mess with those. But I'm not really going to talk about those. You can mess with them on your own time. I'm assuming you know what like reverb and delay is. So let's go ahead and jump over to the effects tab. So that's everything on the front panel. So you can already do a freaking crap ton with what they've given you. But there's 3 more pages. If we come over here, we have effects. We're able to turn on a granular engine. This looks at the sample, and you can give it a range for the size that it looks at. So the amount of grains. And then we're able to say how fast it plays those grains back. So if I were to, let's go ahead and give you an example of that. So if I solo this top one here, and if we have it off, that's what it sounds like. So let's turn it on, and you see it's changed quite a bit. It's changed the speed. Oh, and do I have the, oh, that's not being modulated anyways. My start delay is way up. That's the problem there. So let's fix that. And you see that's very interesting. I could play with this all day, but it's just selecting like basically samples, and basically we call those grains, and it can play them back at different speeds, and we can give it different size selections to get very interesting results. To turn the grain mode on or off, you have to click here to do so. So very, very cool. We have cutoff, and the cutoff controls the filter. Right now, the filter is not anything. If we go this way, we get a high pass. If we go the other way, we get a low pass. And let's go ahead and move the cutoff value in order to hear the low pass. So there we have. We're also able to add resonance to our filter. And you might be going, oh, these are weird filters. You're right. They do this, though, because then you can take advantage of the scheme they've got going on, this randomization power, and you can actually randomize these. A quick note that I just realized I did not say. If you come over to the main and you hit this randomize parameter, let's go back and change this to where it was. Cool. And right now, that's just no filtering. And so we're going to go over to main. And if I go to reverse and turn this on, it'll randomize the reversal parameter. But if I go to speed, you see that it's off. So this is actually per each side thing. So you could turn this on for each one and it will randomize all of them. So you can get some really cool results. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead. If you hit this orange button, it'll turn them all on. So everything you can randomize will turn on. Or if you hit it again, it will turn them all off. So as you see, I'm taking advantage of that so I don't have to go through here and turn them off. I don't know of a fast way to reset parameters that have been randomized, though. So if anyone knows of that, let me know. I'm kind of curious. I couldn't find it anywhere. All right, let's go ahead and move over. So that's the effects. And literally all that changes is this page. So we've already covered that. We have envelope. We can change the attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just envelopes. You have a loop option for your envelope if you need a loop. And let's go ahead and jump over to the external. So external. So we see here that we have these insert and send effects, and we have two of these. These are simply linking up to these guys down here. Again, we can come in, we can change these. Actually, I'm not sure if I said it in this one, but if you go into the structure of it and go inside, we have these. We could choose different effects. We don't have to select these. So if you right click on the background and go to we go to instrument, and we come in here and we go to effects, and you're able to select just a whole load of really awesome effects. Really nifty. You can come in here and just take advantage of the things that come with it, and you hook them up just as it shows here. So we see here we've got our left right on. We have our input coming in, and our output, boom, boom. And you're able to change the behavior of these. So we have insert, we have send. They behave sort of the way you would think. Send is mixed in after it goes through the decay, whereas insert is mixed in before. And so that's just one. There's a couple other differences, but I almost always leave it on send. So just turn it on to your liking, and you can change the amount here of the effect. So very handy dandy. And they also have the same setup with the modulation tab. We have an external modulation matrix. You're able to take like a source such as modulation A through D, go to a destination. So in order to take advantage of this, you would have to open up something that can receive MIDI notes. So I'm going to output MIDI on port 1 of SLayer. And then I'm going to open up some synth, perhaps FM8. And I'm going to have this ensemble output sequencer A, so modulation A. And I'm going to have it output the note 60-something, 61. And I'm going to change FM8 to receive things on MIDI input port 1. And so now when I hit that note, it will trigger a note C1. Now remember that it's going to output the last volume, so I expect the note to hold. And you see there it goes, and it's outputting notes even though we hit a note on this ensemble. So that is a very handy-dandy way of controlling external things, but it's not one that I really ever use, just something cool you can do. We also have our stereo and multi-out. So stereo, it will put out a stereo source. There you have it. Whereas multi-out will allow you to take each individual sample and, oh, it's not set up. What you have to go is you go into Reactor, you go to Processing. Oh, it is set up. Let's look at. Oh, I bet I have solo on. I do have solo on. Okay, figured it out. I was like, what the junk? Okay, cool. So there you go. You can see that they are coming out all the different inserts, whereas stereo will only go out the one that I have selected. So, okay, I was like, oh, that was weird. So there you go. So things that you want to be aware of, because I saw only the top one was playing. That gave me a little clue to come into solo and check out what was going on there. Maybe I had something muted. Maybe I had the start decay function weird. So you just got to check settings that are likely the culprits. And that is pretty much in a nutshell S layer. I know it's a lot of information to take in. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'm going to be covering all these features in more detail as we get going through the series. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.